Okay. We should be on Mem Vav, right? Amud Aleph,
Yes.
right? About 3-4 lines down. Okay,
Yep.
we saw that the question about where the rainfall would have a Shabbos domicile, right, was such that it depended on, one argued it could be the ocean, one argued it could be the clouds, maybe there are different clouds. And it said, no, the water in the clouds is constantly in motion, and therefore we got to a point where it said, likewise, the water in the ocean is constantly in motion, and it doesn't acquire a residence there either. Okay, that's where we sort of left off, right? So we're about four lines down on Mem Vav Amud Aleph 46a1. Okay, so at this point, okay, what do we see? It says, following on that, Naharot HaMoshchin, we're talking about flowing rivers, Umayinot HaNova'in, and springs that continue are constantly, okay, gushing, right? Harehen kiraglei kol adam. They are like the feet of the average person, okay? In other words, whoever owns them, okay, that is, and that person's status of their tchum, that is what the water coming from those locations, if one takes the water and carries it, they have that amount of tchum carrying that water. Okay? All right. Having said that, now, remember we left off with a discussion in the Gemara. Did someone have to specifically spell out the location of their Shabbos residence verbally? Or was it sufficient to do it non-verbal? Okay, so for example, we could say one could put food there. That might be a act, but not necessarily verbal. Okay, certainly if the person walked there to that place and stayed there, even if they didn't say anything, their mere presence also shows us that they're designating that as a Shabbos residence. Okay? So the question we come back to now is, what about a sleeping person? Okay? After all, would we compare them, as we saw, to property? Okay, especially ownership-less, okay, property? Or do we say because the person can wake up, right, and therefore either verbally or say something or physically do something, that we've acquired a residence there? Okay, so that's the argument we're coming back to. Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Halakha ka Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that the law is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Remember, he was the one who said that the sleeping person could still have 2,000 amos as their tchum. Amar le Rabbi Zera le Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, okay? Says as follows to Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Befeirush, okay? Did he say it explicitly? Shemi'alach, did you hear it from him explicitly? Or miklala shemi'alach, or was it a general inference that you gathered from him? Right? So he says, Amarle said to him, Befeirush shemi'ali, I heard it from him explicitly. My klala, and what possible inference could you have gained to have learned that if you didn't learn it explicitly from him? The Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, halacha kedivrei hamakel be'eruv, where Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says that the law is like the one who is lenient regarding Eruv. Now, Eruv, remember, is clearly the Rabbanan. And we generally say the Rabbanan, right, is a kula. Right? So here too, see, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri seems the more lenient between his argument and the rabbis. We could say that would be the inference from there, right? Vitarte. So the Gemara now asks, if you could have learned it from the inference, but we also have it as an explicit statement that the law is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, why do we need two statements telling us this? Vitarte lamali. Why two do we need? Amar Rav Zera tzrichi. Rabbi Zera says we need the two. The Iyashmein in halacha ka Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. If we had only learned explicitly that the law was like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Hava Amina, I would have said, Bein Lakula, Bein Lachumra. Okay? Maybe that is true whether it was a leniency or stringency. Kamash Malan, Halacha Kedivrei Hamakel Be'eruv. Therefore, it comes to teach us that the law is according to the one who is more lenient in regards to Eruv. So the Gemara questions the language. V'lema halacha kedivrei hamakel be'eruv. So let the text of the Mishnah simply say that the law is like the one who's more lenient in regards to Eruv. Halacha ka Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri lamali. So then why do we need the statement that expressly says that the law is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri? It's tarich. We need that as well. Saka da'atach amina. It's possible I might have thought to say, Hani mili yachid b'makom yachid. That here we have a case of one versus one. That could be the case. In other words, in that point, we would say the law is like him. V'rabim b'makom rabim. Or if we have many authorities versus other many authorities, we could say the law is like the more lenient one, or like so-and-so. Aval yachid b'makom rabim. Okay, but when we have one view versus many, right? In that situation, ema lo. I might have said no, that the rabbis were against him and he was a single authority, and therefore majority rules, and that the law would not be like him. Now, we're going to continue here. Amar le Rava la Abaye. So Rava says to Abaye, Mechdei Eruvin, the Rabbanan, since we're saying Eruvin, all the laws of Eruv are rabbinical enactments and not Torah, Mali Yachid b'makom Yachid, Umali Yachid b'makom Rabim. What difference does it make if we have a machloket, when it's one opinion versus another single opinion, or one opinion versus multiple opinions? Okay. Amar le Rav Papa, says Rav Papa the Rabba, Rabbanan, and when it comes to decisions of the rabbis, Lo shane lan ben yachid b'makom yachid v'yachid b'makom rabim. Are you really saying that even in regards to rabbinic enactments, as opposed to Torah enactments, there is no difference between a single opinion versus a single, or a single opinion versus multiple opinions? But I'm going to give you an example. Okay, Rav Papa's going to tell us. Vahatnan. Didn't we learn elsewhere in a Mishnah? Rabbi Elazar, Omer, Kol Isha, She'avru Aleha Shlosha Onot, Daya Sha'ata. That Rabbi Elazar says, any woman who has who has gone 3 months without her period, right? When she counts, it's sufficient to count from that. She's only tme'ah from the last time she counted. V'tanya ma'aseh. And then a Braita teaches an incident. V'asa Rabbi k'Rebbi Elazar. And Rebbe once paskined according to Rabbi Elazar. La'achar sheniskar. And after he remembered, Amar kadei hu Rabbi Elazar l'smoch alav b'shat hadchak. Then said, okay, that Rabbi Elazar is sufficient enough, he's enough of an authority to rely on him even in a time of exigency, let's say, emergency. So the Gemara asks regarding this Braita, Ma'i la'achar sheniskar, what does it mean after Rebbe remembered? Ilema la'achar sheniskar da'ein halacha k'Rebbe Elazar, ela k'Rabbanan. If we're going to say that what it meant was that he remembered that the law was not like Rabbi Elazar, but rather like the rabbis, b'shas hadechak heichi avid kavatei. Even in a time of exigency, a time of emergency, how is it possible that we could go act according to him? Ella, rather, delo itmar hilchata, but rather what he remembered was that there was no clear halacha stipulated. Lo ka Rabbi Elazar, v'lo ka Rabbanan. Neither like Rabbi Elazar, nor like the rabbis. La'achar sheniskar, that's what's after he remembered. Delav yachid paligale, that there was no individual who disagreed with him. Ela rabim pligale, but rather there were many who disagreed with him. Amar kadai hu Rabbi Elazar l'smoch alav b'shat hadchak. And that's why he then said, Rabbi, that Rabbi Elazar, even though he's a single authority, is significant enough that one can rely upon him in a time of emergency. Now, that would seem to challenge the whole point that in regards to rabbinic enactments, okay, because he was saying that it only went back to a woman, okay, whereas if it was a Torah issue, she would be tme'ah for 24 hours at least prior to her discovery of her period. Okay. Now, Amar Rav Masharshia the Rava. Now Rav Masharshia says to Rava, Va'amre la Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak la Rava. And others say it was Rav Nachman who said it. Bar Yitzchak said it to Rava. Ubida Rabbanan, lo shani ben yachid b'makom yachid, ben yachid b'makom rabin. Again, asking the same question, right? That with regards to rabbinic enactments, we say that there's no difference when there's a single authority versus another single authority, or a single authority versus multiple authorities. I'll give you another example, right? Vahatanya, but aren't we taught elsewhere in another Braita, Shmua Kra'oba, okay, when we have a situation of a death, right? And the issue is such that the death is reported in a short period of time, okay? No heget shiv'a ushloshim, that the person then who heard about it must observe both Shiva period and 30-day period. Rechoka, but if he heard about the death in a longer period of time, here we're saying it was delayed, okay? Right? In other words, he didn't hear about the death till more than a month after it occurred. Eina noheget ela yom echad. but he only would observe 1 day of mourning. Ve'ezohi krova, ve'ezohi rechoka. And what do we mean when we say that it was a death, notice of a death in a short or current period of time versus a distant period of time? Okay? B'toch shloshim krova. If it's within 30 days, it is considered current, recent. L'char shloshim rechoka. After 30 days, it is considered distant or delayed. Okay? Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's the view of Rabbi Akiva. V'chachamim omrim, but the sages say, echat shmu'a krova ve'echat shmu'a rechoka. Regardless, it's the same whether it was recent knowledge of the death or extended, distant knowledge of the death. Noheget shiv'a u'shloshim. Okay, whatever the report of the death is, one is to carry out both shiva and shloshim. V'amar Rabba bar Chana, amar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi bar Chana in the name of Rabbi Yochanan says as follows: Kol makom she'ata motzei yachid mekel v'rabim machmirim. Now, coming back to this discussion, okay, of is there a principle here when we say single authority versus single authority versus multiple authorities? Now we're coming to try to deal with the question of, this more in a general case. Kol makom she'ata motzei yachid mekil v'rabim machmirim. Any place you find where the individual is lenient and the majority is stringent, right? Halacha kedivrei hamachmirim, hamerubim. Okay? The law is like those who are stringent, the majority. Chutz mizo, with the exception of this. In other words, with the exception of the issues of avelus, right? She'af al pi she'Rebbi Akiva mekil v'chachamim machmirim, that even though Rabbi Akiva is lenient and the sages are stringent, halacha kedivrei Rabbi Akiva. The law is like Rabbi Akiva. V'savar la kishmuel, and he holds similar to the view of Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel, as Shmuel says, halacha kedivrei hamekal or hamekil ba'avel. Okay, that the law is according to the lenient one in terms of mourning. Ba'avelut hu da'akilu ba'rabanan. So now the Gemara is telling us, with regards to mourning, we say the rabbis are lenient, right? Aval ba'alma, but in general, afilu b'rabanan, even in regards to laws pertaining to rabbinic enactments, shani ben yachid b'makom yachid, ben yachid b'makom rabbi. Okay? That there really is a distinction, if you will, between one authority versus a single authority, okay, versus another individual authority versus multiple authorities, okay? And that contradicts, of course, Rava's statement. Now, going on to Mem Vav Amud Beis. So now we've clarified that there are certain key principles, okay, by which the halacha is determined. Okay? So the Gemara wants to go on. Rav Papa Amar Itz Tarich. And Rav Papa says it was necessary, again, to have included both statements, that Rabbi Yochanan, the law is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, as well as to say the law is like the one who is lenient in Eruv. Salka da'atach amina. It's possible I might have thought the following. Hanimili be'eruvei chatzerot. That this only applied in regards to making an Eruv for courtyards. Aval be'eruvei tchumim. But in regards to making boundaries, an Eruv regarding Shabbos boundaries, ema lo. I might have thought no, because maybe I might think that Shabbos boundaries are a doraita and not a derabbanan. Okay? Tzricha. Therefore, I needed to say both. Umina temra deshani lan bein eruve chatzerot le'eruve tchumim. And on what basis might you say that we can distinguish between eruvin for courtyards and eruvin for Shabbos boundaries? T'tnan. Why? Because it's taught in a Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda b'med dvarim amurim. What are we talking about? Be'eruvei tchumim, with regards to boundaries for Shabbos boundaries. Aval be'eruvei chatzerot, but in regards to combining courtyards as a single household unit, ma'arvin bein ledat, bein shelo ledat. That can be done whether the person is aware or not aware. Shezachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. Because we say we have a concept that we can benefit a person even without their presence. Ve'ein chavin la'adam ela b'fanav. But we cannot make an obligation on a person unless we have their, so to speak, presence, their consent. Now, Rav Ashi Amar eats tarich. And Rav Ashi says, of course, that this is necessary to state also, okay, about specifically Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Salka da'atach amina, because here perhaps I would have thought, Hani mili b'shi'ure iruve. Okay, maybe this is in regards to the remainders of the Eruv, right? Aval b'tchilat Eruv, but initially setting up the Eruv, ema lo. I would say no. Umina temra deshani lan bein shi'ure Eruv b'tchilat Eruv. And on what basis might you have thought to say that we distinguish between the remains of an Eruv, in other words, an existing Eruv that has to be completed or it broke and then repaired, or initially starting an Eruv? T'tnan, because here too we teach in a Mishnah, Amar Rabbi Yossi, b'med dvarim amurim. What are we talking about? B'tchilat Eruv. We're talking about initially starting, right? The minimum amount, okay, that we need to establish the Eruv. Aval b'shi'ure Eruv afilu kol shehu. But we may have thought that any amount, okay, even some remnants of food would be enough for the Eruv. V'lo amru la'arev chatzerot ela kadei shelo lishkoach Torat, excuse me, Torat Eruv min hatinokot. Okay, and maybe the rabbis only established and said about establishing certain amount of foodstuffs in order to make Eruv Chatzerot, right? So that the whole concept of Eruv would not be forgotten, okay, by children. Okay? Now, Rabbi Yaakov, the Rabbi Zrika. Okay, so now we're going to get into, since we touched on the previous discussion that tried to focus on were there key principles, okay, by which to determine halakha. Gemara is going to go into a tangent here, okay, and say, what about other principles, okay, other determining factors, okay, for saying that there is a way of determining halakha. Okay? And that's what we're going to see at this point. Okay? Now, coming back to the text. Excuse me. Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Zrika, the two of them, Amru said, halakha ka Rabbi Akiva mechavero. The law is like Rabbi Akiva in a discussion with a colleague. Uka Rabbi Yossi mechavero. And the law is like Rabbi Yossi when he has a argument with a colleague. Uka Rebbe mechavero. And the law is like Rebbe when he has a discussion with a colleague. Right? Lamai hilchata. Okay? So in other words, we want to ask what we're turning about. Okay, what do you mean when we say, okay, that what is the law? Okay, in this case, right? Rabbi Asi Amar Halacha. Okay, so if we say, right, that Rabbi Asi says the law, the Rabbi Chia Bar Abba Amar Matin. Okay, and Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, okay, it said we sort of incline toward that person. The Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Amar Nir'in Kilashon Hazeh. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Rabbi Chanina says, no, it sort of appears as if the language of that person is the correct one. So we see some rabbis say you have clear principles in terms of who to decide the halacha by, and others disagree and say, no, the principle isn't always that clear. Okay? Now, Amar Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay? So we now have another statement. Rabbi Meir v'Rabbi Yehuda, halakha ka Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, when it's a machloket of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, he says the law is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Yossi, when it's Rabbi Yehuda versus Rabbi Yossi, halakha ka Rabbi Yossi. Okay, the law is like Rabbi Yossi. Ve'ein sarich lomar, and we don't even have to say Rabbi Meir v'Rabbi Yossi, halakha ka Rabbi Yossi. If it's a machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi, the law is like Rabbi Yossi. Now, hashta b'makom Rabbi Yehuda later. That's where Rabbi Yehuda is not found there. Okay? All right. Rabbi Yossi mibai. Do you even then have to question if Rabbi Yossi is the one that you make the decision by? Okay. Amar Rabbi Asi. This is Rabbi Asi. Erwin, we're about halfway down Mem Vav Amud Beis. Okay. Amar Rabbi Asi, Af ani lo made. So I also have learned, he said, Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbi Shimon. Okay, in a situation where we have Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, halakha ka Rabbi Yossi. The law is like Rabbi Yossi. The Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, as said by Rabbi Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Shimon, halakha ka Rabbi Yehuda. In a machloket of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, the law is like Rabbi Yehuda. Hashta, b'makom Rabbi Yehuda leta. And that's a situation where Rabbi Yehuda is not there, is not present. Okay? But Makom Rabbi Yossi Mibaye, where Rabbi Yossi is there, do you really have to ask? Ibaye laho. So they ask the following, right? In other words, in a situation, Rabbi Meir Rabbi Shimon Mai. When it's Rabbi Meir versus Rabbi Shimon, what is it? Teku. Okay. It remains unanswered. Okay. Now we go on. Right? So why was it, the Gemara wants to know, that we saw that there were some rabbis that had key principles as who to decide by, and others, like Rabbi Mesharshia, who disagreed that you don't have these key principles. Okay? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Mesharshia. He says, Litnehu lahani klali. Okay? If these rules, he said, are not appropriate, these general principles are not appropriate. Minale the Rav Mesharshia ha. How do we know that Rabbi Mesharshia says that? On what basis? Ilema meha. If we say it's going to come from this situation, this case, meha ditnan. From here we teach as follows, this Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Omer, lama hadavar domer, l'shalosha chatzerot hapetuchot zo lezo. Okay? Where Rabbi Shimon says that example we saw of A, B, and C, remember before, that A, okay, and they had overlapping tchumim. A could come to B, C could come to B, but A could not come to C or C to A. And he made the comparison, okay, to three, okay, different courtyards. And courtyard 1 could go to 2, 3 could go to 2, but 1 couldn't go to 3. Okay? So when Rabbi Shimon made this comparison and said, Lama hadavar domer l'shlosha chetzerot hapetuchot zo lezo, 3 courtyards that were open one to another, upetuchot l'reshut harabim, and they were also open to the public thoroughfare. Irvu shtayim hachitzonot, the 2 outer ones made an eruv im ha'emtzait, with the middle one. Hi muteret imahem, vehein mutarot ima, that the middle one is permitted with either one of them, and they are permitted with it, the middle one. Ushtayim hachitzonot asurot zo im zo, and the 2 outer ones are forbidden one to another. And remember, this was our original, really, Mishnah. V'amar Rav Chama bar Guria, and Rav Chama bar Guria, Amar Rav, said in the name of Rav, halacha ka Rabbi Shimon, that the law is like, in this case, Rabbi Shimon. Uman paligale, and who was it that argued with him? Rabbi Yehuda. It was Rabbi Yehuda. And we just got through saying that normally for those who hold principles, when it's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, you'd come down on the side of Rabbi Yehuda. But here, Rabbi Mesharshia is bringing our own Mishnah that shows us that that's not the case. Vaha, right? And here, Amad Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Shimon, halacha ka Rabbi Yehuda. And here you said Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, the law is like Rabbi Yehuda. Elet lav shmamina litnahu. But rather, don't we learn from this that these general principles are not applicable? Umay kusha. So what then is the problem? Dilma hecha de itmar, itmar. Perhaps where it's said, it's said. Hecha de lo itmar, lo itmar. And where it's not said, it's not said. Elameha, it's not. But rather from here, from this Mishnah, Ir shel yachid v'ne'aseit shel rabbi, a city that had belonged initially to one person, but then it became the property of many, right? Ma'arvin et kula. Okay, they all can come together with one eruv, right? Shel rabim v'ne'aseit shel yachid. Okay, if it was a city that had belonged to many, but ultimately became owned by one, okay, if it was public and then became, so to speak, private. Ein ma'arvin et kula. Okay, we cannot join the entire town, entire city in a single eruv. Ela im kain oseh chutzala ke'ir chadasha shebeYehuda. Unless there are additional, let's say, domiciles, habitations just outside that city, the size of the town of Chadasha in Judah, sheyesh ba chamishim diurim, that has 50 inhabitants, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, but Rabbi Shimon says, as we go over a little bit, shalosh chatzerot shel shnei batim, that you have to have 3 courtyards of at least 2 buildings apiece, right? Va'amar Rav Chama bar Guria, Amar Rav, and Rav Chama bar Guria said in the name of Rav, halacha to Rabbi Shimon, that the law is like Rabbi Shimon, right? Uman paligale, and who was it that argued with him? Rabbi Yehuda. It was Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. Now, just we're going to at this point, right? So I just want to go a little tiny bit further. Vaha amad Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Shimon halacha Rabbi Yehuda. But again, he raised the question. But didn't we say the principle was in a machloket of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, the law is like Rabbi Yehuda? Umay kusha. And what's the issue? What's the problem here? Dilma hachanami. Perhaps here too. Heicha de itmar. Itmar, where it's said, it is said, Heicha de lo itmar, lo itmar. Okay, and where nothing is said, where it's not spelled out, nothing is said, and then we would follow the general rules of halacha. And that's where we're going to stop here today. Okay? Erwin, I need to ask you to hold on 1 second. Okay?
Rabbi, thank you very much, Rabbi.
Right? Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Okay.
Okay, Erwin.
Yeah.
I get the feeling the rabbi is still going to put out some sort of a list of the davening. Hopefully it'll come out today. Right?
Okay, I'm going to give him a call because, I don't want it sprung in the last minute.
I agree with you. What happened was last night at the end of Minyan, Dove went up to him and asked him the same question.
Yeah.
And he said he was coming out with something. Okay, and then I questioned about it. I told him that I had used the RCA model. Well, he said he was going to adjust that. Okay.
Right.
So,
okay.
All right. So I wanted to let you know I'm going to look at it again myself as well. All right. And So hopefully he'll send it out today. If regardless of what he does, I'll look at Musaf again today and touch base with you one more time, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
All right, take care.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. One other thing. Abe Levy was trying to give me an aliyah on Yom Kippur in the main shul. And I said, I don't think that works. So we're not walking back and forth, after Shacharis to try and find the timing for the aliyah.
Yeah.
So he said, I don't know if you're handling the aliyah or whatever. I should just tell you guys, if you can fit me in, fit me in. If not, don't worry about it.
Okay.
I'll live. I'm not that hung up on it.
Okay. Sure
All
thing.
right.
All
Okay.
right, gentlemen. Thanks a
Take care.
lot.
Speak to you later.
Take care. Right. Bye-bye.
Bye.